There's a moment, quiet and terrifying, that no one warned you about. It's not the breakup, not the funeral, not the job loss, not even the betrayal. It's what comes after. It's when the noise fades and the people stop calling and you're left sitting there with yourself, with everything you used to run from, every thought, every ache, every silence. It's when the world keeps spinning and your heart doesn't. Maybe you're there right now. Maybe you've been there for a long time. Or maybe it's just beginning. And if that hollow ache of loneliness is starting to settle in your chest like a slow creeping fog, then listen closely. Because this isn't the end. In fact, it might be the first time you're finally being asked to meet you. There's something Carl Jung once hinted at, not in lectures, not in textbooks, but in the quiet undercurrents of his deepest reflections. He understood that when loneliness stops being a symptom and starts becoming a mirror, something holy begins. Not holy like religion, holy like raw, like real, like standing in the ruins of your identity and realizing you were never broken, just buried. And sometimes life isolates you not to punish you, but to introduce you to the version of yourself you abandoned to be loved. So in this video, we're not going to lecture, we're not going to fix anything. We're going to feel you're not alone here. If you've ever felt like the world was loud but you were invisible, if you've ever questioned your worth when the messages stopped coming, if you've ever lied awake wondering why the people you gave the most to couldn't stay, then this is for you. You've been surviving on half of yourself, numbing pain with productivity, swallowing grief with distractions, pretending loneliness was just a phase. But what if I told you that loneliness isn't the wound? What if it's the doorway? Let's walk through it gently. And if at any moment this resonates, if you feel seen, if your soul softens even a little, breathe, and know that you are the reason this space exists. Subscribe if you want to feel less alone in the world. Like this video so it reaches the ones hiding their hurt behind a smile. It helps more than you know. Now, come with me. Let's begin. There was a woman who sat in the middle of her kitchen floor every night at 2 a.m., not because she couldn't sleep, but because the silence was the only thing that didn't lie to her. She had everything the world said would make her happy: a stable job, a partner, a home filled with curated beauty. But she felt like she was disappearing, not all at once, but piece by piece. First her laughter, then her light, then her voice. And one day, without warning, everything fell apart. He left. The job slipped away. The friends became polite ghosts. She thought the loneliness would kill her. But what really shattered her was how much she didn't know herself when there was no one left to perform for. And so she sat there, in the stillness, in the ache, in the questions, not because she wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. That woman could be you, or me, or any of us. Because life has a quiet way of orchestrating moments that crack us open not to destroy us, but to show us the truth we buried underneath the noise. You see, loneliness wears many masks. It shows up as scrolling until your thumb hurts just to feel a flicker of connection. It shows up as staying in rooms that make you shrink because being invisible feels safer than being alone. It shows up as laughter that doesn't reach your eyes, as conversations that don't touch your heart, as relationships where you whisper your needs instead of speaking them. But beneath all of it is longing. Longing to return to yourself. The truth is, you didn't lose yourself all at once. You lost yourself every time you silenced your intuition to be accepted, every time you swallowed your sadness to seem strong, every time you made yourself small to make others comfortable. And loneliness? It's the echo of everything you left behind. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Let that land. Because this kind of loneliness, the one that doesn't fade when people enter the room, is a signal, a whisper from the soul, a reminder that it's time to come home. not to the home others created for you, but the home within yourself. And coming home is not comfortable. It is not pretty. It is raw, awkward, sometimes excruciating, because to truly meet yourself, you must face every version of you that was abandoned for survival. The version that cried alone in childhood because emotions were too much for the adults around you. The version that loved too quickly, too deeply, because even crumbs felt like a feast. The version that learned to earn affection by being useful, agreeable, quiet. And here's the hardest part: when the world no longer distracts you, those versions come knocking. Not to haunt you, but to be held. Loneliness is the moment they arrive. The question is, will you open the door? Because buried beneath the ache is the awakening. Not the kind of awakening that shouts or shines, the kind that sits beside you in the dark and whispers, you don't have to abandon yourself anymore. And once you hear that voice, your real voice, there's no going back. You'll start to feel when a room dishonors you. You'll notice when a relationship demands your silence as payment for closeness. You'll feel the sting of your own self-betrayal when you say yes out of fear. And it'll hurt, but it'll also heal, because finally you're listening. You're no longer begging others to see you. You're beginning to see yourself. And once that seeing begins, truly begins, it's disorienting. Because the mask no longer fits, but the mirror still frightens you. You've lived so long by the rules of approval, validation, perfection. And now, here you are, standing alone in a silence so heavy it feels like it could crush you. But listen closely. That silence, it's sacred, not punishment, not exile, sacred. Because something happens when you stay, when you don't run from the ache, when you finally stop trying to be okay and just allow yourself to be real. There's a kind of death that occurs, the death of who you thought you had to be. And it's terrifying, because who are you without the role, without the performance, without the smile that hides the sadness? There's no one clapping for you in this space, no accolades, no one telling you you're doing great. It's just you. And God, that kind of loneliness can feel unbearable, but only because you've never been taught to sit with yourself without flinching. No one taught you how to hold your own sorrow with tenderness. No one taught you that your worth isn't something you earn, it's something you remember. And so, most people try to escape it. They jump into distractions, into new relationships, into busyness, into endless scrolling and mindless routines. But the loneliness remains, like a ghost, because you can't outrun something that lives inside you. You can only meet it. And here's the thing the world doesn't tell you. When you finally stop running, when you sit in that stillness long enough, something inside begins to soften. The ache, it becomes a doorway. The silence, it becomes a sanctuary. And the loneliness, it becomes a guide that gently pulls you inward toward the parts of yourself you forgot how to love. The little girl who never felt enough, the teenage boy who swallowed his voice to survive, the woman who gave until there was nothing left, the man who wore strength like armor but wept in secret. They're all waiting, not for you to fix them, but to feel them, to witness them, to whisper, "You were never too much. You were never wrong. You were just unseen." Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Loneliness has a way of making the unconscious rise. Suddenly, the patterns you repeat, the people you chase, the wounds you carry, they all come into the light. And it hurts, but it also liberates. Because for the first time, you get to ask, who am I without the pain? Who am I without the mask? Who am I when I'm not trying to be loved? And the answer doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments. In a quiet morning where you make yourself tea without rushing. In a journal page filled with truth instead of pretending. In a breath that doesn't need to be held. In the choice to say no when your body screams enough. It comes when you stop trying to be who they wanted and start becoming who you are. That's the gift of loneliness. It strips away everything false until only truth remains. Not the performative truth, the deep one, the trembling sacred truth that lives beneath all your wounds. The one that whispers, "You are not broken. You are becoming." And becoming is not a linear path. It's not a highlight reel. It's not neat. It's not something you can chart or predict or perfect. Becoming often looks like crying in the car for no clear reason. It looks like canceling plans because your body can't fake it anymore. It looks like losing interest in everything that once made you feel valuable but was really just survival dressed up as achievement. Becoming is the quiet dismantling of who you had to be. And that dismantling often happens in loneliness. Because only when the noise fades can you hear your soul. You might not trust it at first. That soft voice, that gentle tug inward. You've been trained to look outward for answers, to follow rules, to fit molds, to be liked. But the voice inside you doesn't care about likes. It cares about truth. And here's the strange paradox. The more you allow yourself to feel the fullness of your loneliness, not escape it, not numb it, the less alone you actually are. Because in that moment, you begin to feel with yourself, not just by yourself. That is sacred. Most people don't ever get there. They skip this part. They rush to fill the void with people, plans, promises. But you're still here. And that means something. It means there's a part of you that's ready to meet the version of you who doesn't need to chase love because she's learning how to give it to herself. It means there's a boy inside you who never got to cry, who never got to be held, and now you're the one who gets to hold him. It means the mask is cracking and the light is beginning to seep through. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow not as something evil, but as something exiled, hidden, repressed. And loneliness has a way of waking the shadow, not to shame it, but to finally listen. Your anger is not wrong. Your need is not weakness. Your sadness is not a flaw. These are the exiled parts of you that learn to stay quiet in order to be safe. But safety is not the same as aliveness. And when loneliness enters, it brings with it the invitation to feel alive again, not by being loved by others, but by loving every part of you you once abandoned. So if today you feel the weight of your aloneness, breathe. Don't resist it. Ask it why it's here. Ask it what it wants you to see. Ask it what it's protecting. You might be surprised because sometimes that ache in your chest is not asking to be healed. It's asking to be heard. It's asking you to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. To remember what it feels like to rest without guilt. To remember that your sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a compass. To remember that silence is not empty, it's full of everything you've ignored. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to gather yourself. Not just the parts you're proud of, all of you, especially the parts that once made you feel unlovable, because that's where the healing lives. Not in becoming someone new, but in welcoming the one you were always too afraid to be. At some point, something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, almost like a quiet breath you didn't know you were holding, finally released. You wake up one morning, and the silence doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like peace. You walk into an empty room, and instead of feeling small or invisible, you feel safe, rooted, present. You stop reaching for people who always made you prove your worth. You stop apologizing for needing time alone. You stop explaining your wounds to those who only ever came close to judge them. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. The kind of clarity that only arrives after you've sat with your shadows long enough to know they aren't monsters. They're messengers. You realize that loneliness, real loneliness, is never just about missing others. It's about missing yourself. And when you finally return to you, everything changes. The people who once felt magnetic lose their pull. Not because they changed, but because you did. You're no longer available for love that asks you to shrink. You're no longer addicted to fixing what doesn't want to be healed. You no longer entertain connections built on the fear of being alone, because now you know you're not alone. You have you. And for the first time, that feels like enough. This is the paradox Jung knew so intimately, that in walking into the dark, we don't lose ourselves. We find the parts that were waiting to be loved back into wholeness. But you don't need to name it as healing or shadow work or any spiritual label. You just need to feel it, to sit beside your pain without rushing it, to let the tears come, not because you're weak, but because they cleanse, to laugh again, not the polite kind, but the kind that bubbles up from your belly and shocks you with its honesty. You begin to understand the slow beauty of becoming whole. You begin to choose differently. You don't rush back to the world just to prove you're okay. You don't chase relationships just to avoid the ache. You sit, you breathe, you create space. And in that space, the real ones find you. Not the ones who love the mask. The ones who love your truth. The ones who don't fear your silence. The ones who meet you not to rescue you, but to walk beside you. But even they are no longer your saviors, because you already found the one person who can hold your hand through every unraveling. You. That's the gift of loneliness. It turns the volume down on the world so you can hear yourself again. It breaks your heart open so you can fill it with your own presence. It strips you of illusion, so what's left is real. It's not the enemy. It's the invitation to feel, to remember, to return, not to who you were told to be, but to who you've always been. And now, standing here, where it all began, maybe you realize loneliness didn't ruin you, it revealed you. And in that revelation, there's a quiet kind of power, not the power you were taught to chase, not the loud, commanding, performative kind. This power doesn't need a stage. It's the power of knowing who you are without applause. It's the power of sitting with your story, every torn page, and choosing not to edit it for someone else's comfort. It's the power of stillness, of softness, of presence. There will still be moments where the old ache returns, that familiar emptiness, the longing, the whisper of, will anyone ever really stay? But now, you don't run from it. You meet it like an old friend. You sit down beside it. You offer it tea. You say, I know you, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. Because the ache isn't asking to be erased. It's asking to be witnessed. And once you become the one who can witness your own pain, you're no longer at the mercy of others to do it for you. You become your own home, your own safe place, your own sanctuary, and the relationships that come after that, they're different. Because you're no longer performing, you're no longer bargaining, you're no longer twisting yourself into a version that fits inside someone else's fear of intimacy. You begin to love from overflow, not emptiness. You begin to give without bleeding. You begin to receive without guilt. And yes, there will be fewer people, but they will be real. And more importantly, you will be real. And being real, even in loneliness, is freedom. You might find yourself walking alone through a park and suddenly feel the sky differently, the trees more alive, the air softer. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, the world starts to feel like it belongs to you again. Not because it changed, but because you did. That's the spiritual awakening no one talks about. It doesn't come with lightning bolts or mountaintops or perfect clarity. It comes in the moment you choose to stay, when everything inside you wants to escape. It comes when you realize the loneliness didn't come to destroy you. It came to awaken you to the truth that nothing outside you can complete you, that your worth has never been measured by your relationship status, your popularity, your productivity, or your perfection. That the love you were looking for has always been waiting within you. And slowly, you begin to return to life. Not rushing, not forcing, just arriving, moment by moment, breath by breath. You begin to create again, not for approval, but for joy. You begin to speak again, not to impress, but to connect. You begin to rest again, not from exhaustion, but from trust. And you realize something beautiful. Loneliness was never a curse. It was your soul knocking. And you finally answered, maybe now you understand why the silence was necessary. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because nothing less would have gotten your attention. The universe, God, your soul, whatever name you give, that deeper intelligence, it doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it waits. And when you've ignored yourself long enough, when the pretending becomes unbearable, when the seeking outside runs dry, it nudges, sometimes through heartbreak, sometimes through stillness, sometimes through the unbearable weight of loneliness. It's not cruelty, it's precision, because only in that hollow space, stripped of distraction, can the real conversation begin. The one between you and you, no masks, no roles, just truth. And at first, that truth might be ugly, or terrifying, or overwhelming. You might find grief buried so deep, you forgot what you were mourning. The father who was never really there, the friend who slowly drifted away, the childhood you had to grow out of too fast, the parts of yourself you sacrificed just to feel loved. And here's the thing, when you start to feel it all, it doesn't mean you're going backwards. It means you're finally safe enough to feel, and that is sacred. Because healing isn't about erasing your past. It's about letting the truth of it live in your body without shame. It's about saying, yes, this happened, and I survived, and I'm still here. And slowly, the shame starts to loosen. You stop blaming yourself for the love you didn't get. You stop apologizing for your sensitivity. You stop measuring your value by how useful you are to others. You start listening to your body, to your heart, to the small, quiet voice inside that says, this is who I am. And maybe for the first time, that voice feels trustworthy. Not because it shouts, but because it tells the truth. Carl Jung understood that individuation, becoming whole, isn't about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you lost along the way. And loneliness, as painful as it is, clears the space for that reclamation. It's a detox from everything false, from the identity you built to be accepted, from the coping strategies that kept you safe but small, from the love that came with conditions. And once that detox begins, you begin to breathe differently, deeper, slower. More honestly, you're no longer holding your breath, waiting to be chosen. You fair chosen you. And that changes everything. Because when you come back to yourself, your boundaries stop feeling like walls. They feel like doors that only open for those who honor your truth. Your solitude stops feeling like emptiness. It feels like restoration. Your sadness stops feeling like failure. It becomes a companion, a teacher. And that constant gnawing ache for someone to finally understand you, it fades because you finally understand yourself. And no one can take that away. So here you are now, not fixed, not finished, but more whole than you've ever been. You might still feel tender, fragile even. That's okay. Because when you start to live from truth instead of survival, everything becomes more raw, more real. Your no carries weight now. Your yes comes from a place of alignment, not fear. You're no longer chasing people who don't see you. You're no longer begging for crumbs and calling it connection. You've outgrown the illusion. And maybe that's what loneliness was always meant to do, to strip away what was never love, so you could recognize what is. You don't need to wear the mask anymore. Not with yourself. Not with the world. You've learned to sit in silence and feel its pulse. You've learned to cry without apology, to laugh without performance, to speak without rehearsing. You've learned that your aloneness is not a flaw, it's a form of freedom. You don't need to be needed to matter. You don't need to be chosen to belong. You belong to yourself now, and you trust that the people meant for you will feel the honesty in your presence. because you're no longer pretending. You're no longer performing worth. You're no longer diluting your truth just to keep the peace. Now, you are peace. And it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's soft, still, steady. The kind of peace that comes when you know, in your bones, that no one can take from you what you've reclaimed within yourself. That's what Carl Jung was really pointing to when he explored the human psyche, not just a map of the mind, but a path to the soul. And on that path, loneliness isn't a dead end. It's the beginning. The beginning of seeing yourself, of trusting yourself, of remembering yourself. You'll still have hard days. You'll still feel the pull to go back, to numb, to hide. But now you know the way through. You've walked through the fire and found your own hand in the dark. You've whispered to your inner child, I won't leave you again. You've chosen yourself over and over, even when it hurt. That's what makes this transformation unshakable, because it wasn't given to you by someone else. It was born in your solitude, in your silence, in your sacred, aching loneliness. And no one can take that away. Now, let yourself rest. Let yourself be. No more chasing. No more fixing. Just being. You've earned it. And if this journey resonated with you, if you felt even a flicker of recognition, of truth, of relief, then let it settle into your bones. Let it change how you speak to yourself. Let it change what you allow. Let it change what you expect from love. And if this story touched something in you, let it reach someone else too. Share it, send it, save it. Not because you have to, but because someone out there is sitting in the dark, thinking they're the only one, and they need to know they're not alone. You weren't alone. You were becoming, and now you're here. Still breathing, still becoming, still home,